I'm Jackie MacLennan, and I'm speaking to you today as head of White & Case's global pro bono practice, and someone who's fortunate to have been involved in the Jessup for many years. This year, again, Jessup has shown its flexibility. We can't meet in person, but we can embrace the virtual Jessup and the wider digital opportunities for discussion and for networking. Let me first congratulate all the student competitors in the Jessup this year. The work you've put in is immense, and you should feel so proud of what you've achieved, particularly in these difficult, challenging times. With all that's happening in the world right now, the skills and the understanding and the respect for the rule of law and the role of international law in particular that you've learned through your Jessup participation is more important than ever. This year, we celebrate the 15th year of White & Case's global partnership with the Jessup. We want to promote the Jessup and all it stands for as widely as possible, because we believe, and I've seen firsthand, that the Jessup is much, much more than a competition. It's a community, and it's made stronger by your participation. It's a community which produces our world's leaders. And as you may know, the Jessup motto says, future world leaders will look at each other differently, for they'll have met here first as friends. And right now, we need world leaders who can speak to each other as friends. Last year, we established an annual award to honor a Jessup alumni who's had an impact on the legal profession and the world. Jessup alumni have gone on to very impressive, important careers, truly making a difference across the globe as lawyers, as professors, judges, government officials, politicians, and business leaders. And the purpose of this award is simple. By reminding you, participating in the Jessup today as students, of the great achievements of distinguished members of the Jessup alumni community, we hope to inspire you to achieve great things too. For this award, we look for a leader with vision, with a commitment to international cooperation, the rule of law, and the legal profession. And this year, I'm delighted to announce the recipient of the award is Judge Hilary Charlesworth, member of the International Court of Justice. Judge Charlesworth participated in the Jessup competition in 1980 as a student at the University of Melbourne, and she stayed connected to the Jessup by coaching teams and judging Jessup rounds since then. You may indeed have seen her in action this year, as we were honoured to have her judging the 2022 championship round. Judge Charlesworth is a leading scholar and jurist who very quickly established herself as a pioneer in the field of feminist international law. And she's made a very significant contribution to the study and practice of international law generally. Judge Charlesworth is the Harrison Moore Professor of Law and Melbourne Laureate Professor at the University of Melbourne and Distinguished Professor at the Australian National University. She's a barrister and solicitor at the Supreme Court of Victoria, and she was elected to the International Court of Justice in November 2021, and she was an ad hoc judge before that. She's been president of the Australia and New Zealand Society of International Law and a member of the Executive Council of both the Asian Society of International Law and the American Society of International Law. She's been twice recognized for her accomplishments by the American Society of International Law, and she's received the award for preeminent contribution to creative scholarship with Christine Chinkin for the seminal book they co-authored, The Boundaries of International Law, A Feminist Analysis. She's also received the Goler-Teal-Butcher Award, together with Professor Chimkin, for outstanding contributions to the development or effective realization of international human rights law. In 2021, Judge Charlesworth received the Distinguished Scholar Award from the International Studies Association, and a particular pride, because this is close to home for me, since I'm based in Brussels. Amongst her many recognitions, she's received an honorary doctorate from the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium. Judge Charlesworth's work also has a practical side. She's worked alongside human rights organisations in ways to implement international human rights standards, and she's played a leading role in the development of the Australian Capital Territory's human rights legislation. Throughout her career, Judge Charlesworth has been a valued mentor to many, and she served as an inspiration for those who want to use the law as a means to change the world for the better. When you mention her name, it's immediately greeted by an outpouring of affection and enthusiasm and respect by her students and colleagues alike. Truly, she's a role model for us all. So I'm privileged and very honoured to present the White & Case Distinguished Jessup Alumni Award to Judge Hilary Charlesworth. And now we're very pleased to hear from Judge Charlesworth herself. Thank you.
I'm very honoured to receive the White & Case Distinguished Alumni Award. The Jessup competition has played a big part in my professional life, and it's wonderful to see it grow and inspire new generations of international lawyers. I have to admit that I was a disconsolate law student in the 1970s in Australia, and I struggled to complete my law studies. Back then, the study of law mainly consisted of learning rules without considering their social or political context. It wasn't until I encountered international law in the final year of my law degree that things changed. At last, a subject where law had to be studied in its global political context. On a wave of enthusiasm, I joined two friends to form a Jessup Moot team. In those days, only a handful, I think it was just 3 Australian universities participated, and we ended up being sent to Washington as the Australian team. There wasn't, I have to admit, a lot of competition. In 1980, the competition that year was all about the law of outer space. It was the People's Astral Union against the Federation of Celestial States. I still recall those state names today. And in those pre-internet days, I recall long hours trying to track down copies of the records of the United Nations General Assembly's Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space that were critical to the arguments. Participation in the international Jessup Moot competition in Washington was thrilling, meeting teams from all around the world who had a shared interest in the language of international law. And I remain in touch with some friends from that time still today. After the competition in those days, the US State Department sponsored all the international participants on a bus tour of the East Coast of the United States. I remember that we went to Boston, to New York, and to Philadelphia from Washington. And we all had a chance to visit various law schools along the way. And it was really that experience that planted the seed of doing graduate study in international law in the United States. And several years later, I was lucky enough to do so. That experience changed my life, both personally and professionally. So I owe a lot to the Jessup competition. More generally, the Jessup, I think, nurtures a community of international lawyers without borders who have a deep interest in the procedure and jurisprudence of the International Court of Justice. It's important to remember that the International Court of Justice was created to provide an alternative to armed conflict. At the same time, we have to recognise that the court is limited in what it can do. I'd like to quote my predecessor, my colleague and my friend, the late Judge James Crawford, who once said, and I'm quoting from him here, "It's not the function of individual judges in the international court to solve the problems of the world. It's rather to decide individual cases." And James went on, "I have whatever influence on the court I'm entitled to have by virtue of the strength of the arguments in the cases." End quote. Judge Crawford's observation emphasises the significance of the craft of developing and framing arguments in international law, skills that the Jessup competition promotes par excellence. So I think that the wider Jessup community can play a significant role in our fractured world by highlighting both the limits and the potential of international law. I'm very proud to be part of this community, and I'm really grateful to receive this award.